All right, so we're going to talk about more considerations for semi-private training, but now we're going to focus on once the session has actually started. How do we navigate the room? How do we structure the timeline of the session? So Emily's
Yeah.
going to take this one.
So, kind of a couple things to reiterate from the pre-session stuff. We're kind of transitioning into the during session now. I mentioned the warm up is generally about 15 minutes. That's usually a good chunk of time out of it. If you're working out for 60, that 15 minutes is a good marker. Something I'll do to when whoa something I'll a bunch of snow just fell off the roof. Something I'll do to once warm up is finished is kind of as everybody is dispersing. I always say if there's other warm ups that you want to do, make sure you do them. Like always, kind of encourage them to again autonomy. Maybe Sarah didn't get enough of a squat warm up, so she's welcome to do a little bit of extra squatting prep before she begins her squatting test. And then also like the encouraging recording. So again, just the autonomy. Really handy if they have their phone, especially if they're going to disperse. You may have some people that kind of stick around the corner, which is fine too. And you can help them record if they're kind of unsure of how to do that. Maybe it's their first session with you. Yeah, you can just show them the ropes a little bit around there. Um, Another thing to go with that, and again, something we kind of mentioned in the first one, is having a quick look at everybody's program before they come in. Now, you don't need to study it like you would study a personal training program, but just having a quick glance, seeing what kind of movements they're going to be doing, and if someone is in a phase one or like a week one, phase one type situation where it's all brand new stuff, you're going to want to give them a little bit of extra attention, stay a little bit closer to them, make sure you give them a couple demos, encourage them to watch the videos, and make sure they're moving properly. Typically, that first week is where we'll see the most errors because it's likely new stuff. So just a little bit of extra attention for them. And you can tell them that too. I'm just going to stay a little closer to you today because I know it's all new stuff. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate. But in general, most of the time, your athletes are not going to be on week one. They'll be week 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. So they should have a good idea of what they're doing. So they might need a little bit less like hands-on attention. Something that you will want to do though during your session is circulate the room. So you may have people all kind of spread out, some on new weeks, some on old weeks. But regardless of what week they're on or what phase they're on, they're always going to value from feedback. So couple minutes kind of with each person and just kind of going around the room, spending roughly equal time with everybody, watching them move, giving them some feedback on cueing, but also just like checking in. How's the weight feeling? Do we need to go any heavier? Just reminding them that, you know, you're still there as a coach. They're not all on their own here. So a couple minutes with each person and just kind of fill the hour doing that, kind of walking around. Um, what else? Oh, yeah. So another thing we're going to talk about is the time management aspect of this. Now, this is a pretty important piece. Again, in personal training, when it's very kind of one-on-one, you're really in control of how many like sets and reps and keeping them on time. But when it's semi-private and they're a little bit more autonomous, they may kind of get into the zone and stop looking at the clock. Maybe they'll just kind of forget. Maybe their session says like 3 to 5 rounds and they have their heart set on 5 rounds. You may need to get them to pull back a little bit to stay on time. So the way that we kind of gently like to push that is I will just give them general time updates, usually after the warm up, and they begin their sessions. I'll do, you know, the walking around. Then when we get to about half past the hour, I'll kind of announce like, hey, it's 7:30. We maybe have time for like one more round of the current circuit that you're on, and then we'll think about switching to your second half, just to give them that guideline. You got about one round to go, regardless of kind of what their program says. And then maybe at like 35 after, or maybe 40, I'll say like, all right, we should all be on the second half now. And if you notice some people haven't switched over yet, just kind of going over there and making sure they're wrapping up, or yeah, just making sure they're ready to go to their next half. In general, the structure of semi-private sessions is all the same. Sam's going to talk about it a little bit more in depth later, but typically it's like a warm up and then circuit 1 and circuit 2. And everybody should be roughly on that kind of structure, which makes your life easier as a coach. Spend about half the time on circuit 1 and then about half the time on circuit 2. It may not exactly line up to how many rounds is written in the program, but that's kind of the general structure that we go for. Yeah, and then towards the end of the session, with about 10 minutes left is usually when I'll do another time call, and I'll say, hey, we've got 10 minutes left. We should think about maybe wrapping up the round that you're on, and encouraging them to get into some kind of cool down stretch. So you have the choice here. If you'd like, kind of with about 5 minutes to go, you can like physically gather everybody back in the corner, and you guys can all do a cool down together, kind of the same way you did warm up together. You may have some people that need to leave a little bit early or have to leave like right on the hour, which totally fine. You can let them go. But at least I would say like encourage them to do a stretch of some kind. So maybe they don't need to come back into the corner, but 10 minutes left. Hey, let's think about wrapping up. 5 minutes left. All right, let's like get into a stretch now. And you can walk around and make sure they're doing an appropriate stretch for the muscles they were using, or if they have no idea, you can give them an example. But it's super valuable if you can kind of give them that clear kind of distinction of time keeping, so that they set aside some time to stretch. Because some people will just go right to the hour working hard and then just leaving when they're still super warm. So it's good if you can get them into a little cool down stretch at the end. I think that's about it. Sam,
Yeah, last thing I would add to that, building on top of what Emily was talking about in terms of differentiating the service for personal training versus semi-private. In personal training, as the coach, we're really responsible for setting the room up, staging it. In semi-private training, it is quite the opposite, where the athlete is in charge of setting things up. If they have difficulties, we can educate, we can coach them. But the real differentiator here also at the end of the session is just also ensuring that the athlete cleans up after themselves. So they put their equipment away. If anything needs wiping down, they'll spray and wipe it down, just like we would in a group class setting. So the only real difference here, if somebody is coming from group training, they may be used to the room kind of being pre-staged and leaving some of that equipment out at the end of the session. With semi-private, we want to kind of completely clean up the room when we are completed the session. So we also want to educate members on that as well during that journey.